Hello and welcome to UKSCA Insights, an exciting initiative from the United Kingdom Strength and Conditioning Association, where we delve into coaching practices, applied research, and speak to some of the best and most exciting coaches and researchers from around the globe to provide you with in-depth insights into the world of strength and conditioning. Today, I am really pleased to welcome Dr. Jason Zhu, a visiting researcher from Middlesex University and an applied biomechanist. Jason, very warm welcome to UKSCA Insights.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me in. Really pleasure to give a little bit of my insight into the area, and really glad to join the meeting today.
Amazing, thank you. So yeah, you're here specifically to talk about your new journal article in the Professional
Yeah,
Strength and Conditioning Journal by the UKSCA, which is entitled Counter-Movement Rebound Jump Testing: Suggestions for
yeah,
Coaches to Optimize Test Utility. So we'll jump into the particulars of the area, the paper, and your recommendations for coaches, because I know a lot of the listeners and people looking at watching these clips on social media um, are
yeah,
often coaches and applied practitioners, and therefore the take home
of
messages
course.
and the application is really important. But before we do that, it'd be really nice for you to just give a bit of an overview of yourself, your journey in S&C and research, and kind of where you are at the minute in terms of career.
Lovely. Thank you, mate. So I did my PhD with Chris Bishop and Anthony Turner at the Middlesex back finished at 2025, and my background is mainly about strength and conditioning, applied biomechanics, and a big part of my work has focused on jump testing, of course, and some time series waveform analysis and how we help the practitioner to interpret the jump task. And recently I joined Conasis and as on-track application support based in the UK. And on-track is a markerless motion capture and monitoring platform. So my role sits quite close to the practical translation of mainly the kinematic variables and the kinetic variables into some very useful information to the coaches and to the practitioners. So I'm going to speak to a lot of things to SNC, physios, and the researchers who are trying to make sense about kinematic variables and motion data in the real practice. And this is why our paper quite aligned with my bolder interest in not just measuring the jump performance, just asking them to jump, but also helping the coaches to understand the movement solution behind it. Yeah,
Yeah, amazing. When we were chatting just off air, weren't we, around how
yeah,
exciting this development is in biomechanics and motion capture, and hopefully
yeah,
at some point companies like Qualsys can get to a point where the markerless systems are reliable, valid, and can really then start to be integrated into the applied world, because we all know
yes,
that 3D motion capture is the gold standard. Um,
yeah.
but the kind of the pre and the post data collection time and kind of complexity of it can often put practitioners off. So yeah, exciting
Yeah.
space that you're kind of stepping into.
I'm trying to do our best. Yeah, there's still a lot of work that the motion capture system needs to do, but we also wanted to provide as much as we can to helping the professional team, the researchers, to making sure they can use the whatever kinematic data and kinetic data in the best manner. Yeah.
Amazing. Right. Well,
Yeah.
obviously your paper moves away from motion capture, but kind of moves on to another
Yeah.
staple piece of biomechanics
Yeah.
technology, which is force plates, and in particular looking at the counter movement rebound jump, which has I know yourself and there's a few other researchers out there in this space that have done some really cool work. So it's great that you've now been able to sort of disseminate all that information into some kind of
Yeah.
practical guidance for the coach. Before we get into the kind of the jump itself, and I really enjoyed the paper, by the way. It was a really good
Oh,
read.
thank you.
I'd like to just start around this concept of slow and fast stretch shortening cycle. And that typical 250 millisecond threshold that we seem to have put onto the
Yeah.
differences between this idea of a slow and fast stretch shortening cycle. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that, on the 250
Yeah.
millisecond threshold, the appropriateness of it, the effectiveness of it, if there are such things as a slow and a fast stretch shortening cycle,
Yeah.
and kind of stuff around that, please.
Yes, I think 250 milliseconds is a very big argument, isn't it? Some people really like these time thresholds. Some people think, okay, in sprinting, let's say top speed, the ground contact time is definitely far lower than the
Mhm.
250. So that useful. In terms of a slow and fast stretch shortening cycle, I was using SNC. I think slow and fast SSC terminology is very much useful, but I've not used it too readily. For me, I think it is more of a continuum rather than well, very two separate boxes. Because let's see, a CMJ is normally a slow stretch shortening cycle task because the athlete has more time to counter move, to break, and to apply the force. And the drop jump or let's say the rebound task is normally designed or intended to be very fast because the athlete is trying to attenuate and then redirect the force rapidly, but the actual execution matters, I would say, because John Harry asking me a very good question. When we were writing the paper, he said, Jason, if an athlete is trying to do a rebound drop jump, but their contact time is around, let's say, 300 milliseconds, are they really showing a faster SSA behavior? Or I think that is exactly the point. The task may be designed for a faster SSC task, but the athlete is trying to using or they may use a slower strategy. So what I would say is, I wouldn't really classify it by the name of the test or just to say by a single contact time of cutoff. Um, I would look at the task intention first. The verbal cues we gave to them, are we asking them to jump as high as fast as they can, or just the fast, or just the height, and as well as the outcome and the movement strategy. So if the goal was a reactive rebound action, but the athlete is spending 300 milliseconds on the ground, that's a very useful information to me because it tells me that the athlete is not applying the type of strategy we intended for that task. So practically, I would say I would use slow and fast SSC as a coaching language rather as a guide, but not as a very hard diagnostic label, because it may help us to frame the task, but the interpretation should come from how the athletes actually perform it.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, that's kind of my answer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I kind of really like the idea of it being on a continuum because I think that's absolutely everything, every kind of neuromuscular function and output that we can get
Yeah.
from this type of technology. There is always a continuum. Is that the thresholding up doesn't always work. So I think
Yeah.
it's the difference between the understanding of the data versus the language used in different environments. And like you said, coaching language
Absolutely.
around fast and slow makes sense. It's like
Yeah.
the kind of powerful, explosive arguments as well. Whereas
Yeah.
if we're really going to look at the physiology and the kinetic and kinematic elements of these different tasks and how they sit along that continuum, we're going to look at it very differently. So yeah, I really enjoyed
Yeah.
that answer.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
So in terms of then the need for the counter movement rebound jump, obviously, and you write sort of nicely and do a good summary of the two tests that this has been born from, which is
Hmm.
the counter movement jump and the drop jump. And as you
Yep.
described, they're very much staples in practice, in research, in terms of um, again using that vernacular of slow and fast, short ground contact time, high ground contact time. They've been used for decades. So I'm interested to understand why or where are the issues with those two tests, or if it's one in particular that has then allowed yourselves and other people to kind of develop this alternative option that almost combines the two tests into one.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I haven't prepared, matey. Uh, so I would say, both drop jump and countermovement jump is amazing test. It's giving the practitioner loads of information that helping us to tracking the athlete's performance. Um, the drop jump is very useful for assessing the reactive strengths and the fast SSA qualities, but compared with Countermovement Jump, it's still more technically demanding and most sensitive to the protocol. And there's a loads of paper discussing this point, absolutely. Let's see, the box height, the actual drop height, the stepping techniques, how the athletes stepping off the box, the cue, what is the best cue we should give to them in order to get the best or the consistent drop jump technique. And same, the athlete's strategy, isn't it? Can all influence the result. So that's why Chris always said to me, we need to be very cautious about interpreting the RSI it's alone if we ignore their component. The other issue we observed is whether the drop height is appropriately selected. So for example, if the box height is too high or the athlete is not very familiar with the task maybe become something like a landing tolerance task or a learning task rather than a clear, clean, reactive strength task. So I would say a longer contact time or a lower RSI value does not always telling us that is a very poor reactive ability. Maybe it sometimes tells us the task is too demanding for the athletes. I think that is a part of the reason why we are interested in investigating and look deeply into the countermovement rebound jump. I have to admit that it does not remove all the issues we discussed before, but it changed the nature of the problem. So instead of imposing a fixed external box height, the athletes during the countermovement rebound jump are going to land from the height they created in the first jump, which is, I would say, pretty similar to the countermovement jump, right? The only difference would be in the countermovement jump, the landing and then standing there. But in the countermovement rebound jump, you perform a countermovement jump similarly and land rebound for the second jump. So the rebound portion is still challenging, similar to the rebound test, but the landing demand is more individualized to the athlete's own jump outcome because everybody is able to land from the maximum jump height that they created by their own. So, and we all know that countermovement jump height is pretty reliable. It's a reliable measure. So the height from which athletes land in the countermovement rebound jump is also likely to be consistent and athletic specific, comparing to choose an arbitrary box height. And I think that's our first intention. But of course, this doesn't mean that the countermovement rebound jump is automatically better than the drop jump, of course. And it's not something like a superior movement test you have to go for. But I would say it offers a more practical way to assess how athletes transition from their own maximum jump height into a rebounding portion. So my view is the drop jump is still very much useful, but it's really needing a very careful standardization in terms of lots of considerations.
Yeah, agreed. And that's not any different to my own experiences of implementing that kind of test. If the individual is familiar, then the kind of the quality and the reliability of the data increases. But if they're not, you can get data that just doesn't quite make sense. And I think a lot of that, in
Yeah,
particular, the kind of the prediction of the drop height, which obviously has a big impact on then therefore
yeah,
what the jump height and the RSI by virtue look like. If that's incorrect because of an incorrect step off or approach to that kind of that
yeah,
step off the box, then again you're fighting a losing battle, as it were. So it makes
absolutely. Yeah,
sense, and I like the fact that the counter movement rebound jump is then individualized to the kind of the neuromuscular qualities and the function available by that
yeah,
individual. And it
yeah,
kind of then it almost makes everything relevant to that individual, and the comparison therefore is going to be better because we know
yeah,
that
exactly.
the intensity of that rebound is going to be 100% to that individual, and
Yeah,
therefore
exactly.
we've got that
Because
cliff.
every time we're just telling them you're going to jump as high as fast as you can, the same for the first and second jump. So you're not going to, let's say, jump out from your control for the
Mhm.
first jump. It's really happened. So the landing would be pretty safe comparing to we ask them have to landing from the 40 centimeters, let's say because some of the athletes in the team be able to landing from 40, it doesn't mean the rest of the team would be able to do so as well.
Mm. Yeah, so let's get into the kind of the particulars of the rebound jump then. And
Yeah, please.
again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think was originally the counter movement rebound jump designed as two counter movement jumps, essentially. So it would be you would do your first jump and then drop into another counter movement jump. But your example or your version of this counter movement rebound jump is essentially a counter movement jump straight into a drop jump. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So when we was initialized the idea for my PhD pretty much back 2022, um, the first intention Chris said to me like, Jason, I think we need to design the test that is trying to simplify the testing sessions. So, for example, if we can do a test that be able to let the practitioner to get whatever information they want to get from all sorts of the testing. Let's say we do a countermovement jump and then rebound as soon as they can after landing. Are we simultaneously get both slow and fast SNC? So we tried to do a lot of practice. This is what happened in my first published paper for the PhD. I indeed gave the cue to the athletes like you're going to jump as high as you can and be fast as quick as much as possible. However, I have to admire that we don't really have a very good athletic quality. I do appreciate the participants, but some of the participants indeed gave me a sense of they perform the movement like two continuous counter movement jump
Yeah.
rather than the first jump being a traditional counter movement jump. The second jump is a faster rebound action. So yeah, that's why I would say we intended to making this task
Mhm.
as slow and fast task. But if the athlete was not very familiar with it and the coaching cue was not clear, it's very, very easily to be performed into a double counter movement jump, of course. Yeah.
And in terms of you mentioned the queuing there, how important is the queuing and what guidance have you got for coaches in order to queue this test or this task effectively so that you can get the most reliable data possible?
Yeah, absolutely. The cue is very important. At the moment, we would recommend the coaches to give the cue like, can you perform a counter movement jump while it's up on your landing? Try to rebound as fast, as high as you can. So this is normally the cue we would use, but from the publication, I do using a very complex sentences. And the
Mhm.
Chris sometimes take the piss. Jason, do you understand why the athletes don't really understand what you're asking for? I said, yes, because my English was not very good. So it's a joke about we do realize if we provided the cue that is pretty long to the athlete, they probably only consume part of it. If the long sentences, they only consume, okay, you just need asking me to do a counterman jump. They just jump, landing, post there. Am I right? So I think the practical point is the cue should really match the purpose of the test. So if we want the maximum output plus a reactive ability, a very good landing rebound behavior, or more sports like the strategy, I think that's very complicated. You have to provide a cue that I need you to be high and also I need you to be as quick as you can because what we don't really want is we gave us the athletes a cue and then they just sacrifice the first jump in
Mhm.
order to preserve some energy for a very good rebound, or they do a very good first jump, but in order to be quick for the second rebound, to just like touch the ground and go. So the jump height was not meaningful. So yeah, so I would say for monitoring purposes, the key is still consistency.
Mhm.
Consistency. Sorry, the cue should be really, really written down. So if there is a different testers across the session, across the season, they have to be able to using a standard cues, making sure they're giving the same input to the athletes, and maybe just write it down. So every time the cue was repeatedly, and especially when during the some very complex movement like drop jump or countermovement rebound jump. Otherwise, I think we are going to compare something like different version of the task rather than the true change in the athletes.
Mhm. And from your research then and your PhD and all the work you've done
Yeah.
in this, how valid and reliable are the two portions of the rebound jump, so the CMJ compared to just a normal CMJ, and then if we
Yep.
are kind of comparing the second the rebound jump as to a drop jump,
Yep.
what's the reliability of those measures and kind of what about the validity as well?
Um, the overall validity and reliability was okay for the first portion of the counter rebound jump plus counter jump because it's a very simple task. Everybody be able to do it. Just need to jump as high as you can, as fast as you can.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of the second jump in our previous two study, the reliability wasn't quite good. I think because we initialized the idea, we have to like practice every participant who willing to help us. So pretty much the lower reliability because they are still learning this journey. I do have a couple participants who used to do their undergrads with Middlesex while helping me through my PhD journey. And when they helped me from the first study to the final study, I can see their individual reliability, the CV value was really going higher
Hmm.
because they've been practicing the counter rebound jump for a couple of repetitions. Um, so obviously the second jump's reliability wasn't that comparable to the drop jump because
Okay.
basically drop jump started from a relatively stable state. So
Yeah.
the drop from a stable platform, rebound, they are quite ready. But for the counter rebound jump, you have to landing from a relatively dynamic situation. So they have to thinking too much. I think they're thinking too much, which kind of like changing the strategy they when they perform the test trial by trial, which I think that is probably the reason why the between session reliability for the second jump matrix from the counter rebound jump wasn't quite good.
Okay.
Yeah, especially for the leg stiffnesses. Yeah, it's not
Okay.
very good. I think they deeping differently by the trial, trying to achieve the verbal cues I gave to them to be quick.
And is there a way of within your own sort of thinkings and conversations with people that are in similar
Yeah.
spaces, have you been able to come up with ways that might that you might be able to improve that reliability, or is it just that it's such a complex task that you're always going to get that movement variability because it's reliant on a reliable counter movement jump, a reliable landing, and then a reliable kind of rebound. And there's a lot of complexity in that, as you've mentioned. Or have you been able to come up with ways that you think might improve that reliability of the second portion?
Mm, good question. Um, when I was trying to help the participant to achieve the task, the strategy I've normally use is I've just ask them, okay, now I need to perform the counter rebound jump, but let's ignore the cue. I need you to perform two jumps, both achieving a very high, just to do two. Normally, they will return to me like two continuous counter movement jump, like boom, boom, two
Hmm.
very high jump. I now then ask them, okay, you'll be able to jump as high as you can for both jumps. Can we try to be quick for both jumps? And then progress for a couple repetitions. And then I ask them, okay, I now need you to integrate both velocity and the maximum displacement into this new test. Can you just be quick and be high for both jumps?
Hmm.
I would start from there. I would
Hmm.
not go directly into, okay, I need you to jump as high as you can, well, as fast as you can for the second jump. Because most of times I do realize they really sacrifice their first jump for a second rebounding. If I give them tiny bit more extra hint saying, I'd like the second jump to be very fast. If I
Hmm.
say so, they'll be just really sacrifice the jump height just to give you the fast. So this is some strategy or some tiny tweak I used to give to the athletes, but the problem is if the athletes never engaged in any rebound work or any drop jump work, it's very, very difficult for them to go straight forward into the counter rebound jump.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes
So,
sense. Yeah.
yeah.
So throughout the paper as well, you kind of
Yeah.
just sort of changing the conversation slightly. You mentioned three different types of metrics:
Yeah.
drivers, strategies, and outcome metrics. Now I am familiar with those terms, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that might not be. So would you mind telling us what these are? So what do they mean? And then what type of metrics would you go after in each of those three categories, specifically around the counter movement rebound jump?
Well, thanks. That's a really amazing question. I think that's probably one key part of the paper, because the main point is that we shouldn't really interpret the jump task by just using one number or one matrix. And in the practice, the further thing people often look at is the high line matrix. In the CMJ, countermovement jump is might be the jump height, and in the drop jump, it might be the RSI or the contact time. And in the countermovement rebound jump, it might be jump height, takeoff velocity, momentum, or something like that. These are what I would call it like tier one matrix, outcome matrix. They tells us what the athletes actually achieved, and I think they are very easy matrix to be communicated between the coaches and practitioners. If we just say this is the jump height and this is the jump momentum, which is the how fast and how much force you applied, and this is your takeoff velocity, and this is your flight time, etc., we would use it as a tier one matrix. However, the outcome matrix doesn't really tell us the full story, because the two athletes can achieve the same jump height or the same RSI, but they're using very different movement solution to get there. So in the paper, we also try to encourage a layered approach to help the integration. That's why we have the second layer, which is what we describe as the driver and the stretch-J matrix. The driver matrix, let's say the braking, the propulsive force, the impulse, or the peak force timings, etc. And this helps us to understand why the athletes produce that outcome. And then the strategy-based matrix, like the time to take off, the phase duration, etc., really describe how the athletes organized the movement to achieve it, and how the athletes use their hip, knee, and ankle joint during the movement. So this layer is really tell us about the movement solution, not just the results. And then we also have the third layer, which is the asymmetry and movement consistency. This is where we start to think about why the athlete is producing the task in the more balanced and controlled way. So are they meaningful left and right differences or asymmetry? Is the athletes collapsing in too much into the landing, or are they producing something like a competent second jump, or are they just trying to find a way to complete the task we cite up to them? I think this is especially important in the CMRJ. If the second jump is lower than the first one, we should not just say, okay, these athletes have really poor rebound ability. There could be several explanations, and they may not really enough to be rebound as quick, or they're just really unfamiliar with the task. So I believe this framework is not just giving coaches some numbers or more matrix. It's about giving a structure to interpret, start with outcome, and then explain it with the driver and strategy matrix, and finally check whether the movement solution is balanced, controlled, and then whether your task is appropriate to them. And this is why the practical implementation becomes really important.
Amazing. Just very briefly then, are there any sort of further practical messages or take homes for coaches that might want to adopt the CMRJ?
Yes. The first, you have to be very clear about why you're using it. I would not present the CMRJ like a replacement for the countermovement jump or drop jump. It's I would say it as an additional test sits in between the two. You started with a controlled CMJ and then just adding the landing rebound portion. Another one I would say standardize the task before you trust your data from the countermovement rebound jump or maybe any jump types, because that means consistent arm position, consistent cue, and the trail numbers, and a clear rule around what counts as an acceptable attempt. I think the athletes also need enough familiarization. Otherwise, the early data may just reflecting a learning effect rather than a very stable physical quality. And third would be just to interpret your outcome based on a layer outcome, just using very simple outcome matrix, looking to their strategy, and then finally checking whether the movement consistency is acceptable.
Amazing. What a great way to finish. Jason, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the paper. Like I said, it's a really great read, and I think anybody that's interested in this type of analysis, this type of profiling should genuinely take a look and think about adopting this as a test, because as we said right at the start of the interview, um, if nothing more, it's a way of individualizing and creating almost a relative comparison against athletes and individuals, which I think is really, really valuable, particularly in the jump profiling space. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the article, and I look forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate the chance to discuss the paper.
Brilliant. See you, Jason. Thank you.
See you. Bye bye.
Okay.